So if you don't know who I am, I'm Christine Fauner and I work in the leadership development space. And this is the Executives Lounge Live Edition. And as you can see, we have some panelists today with us. And it's a pretty eclectic group. And so this group, and we have people rolling in. So it's a pretty eclectic group here. And it's for a reason. And so I'm going to introduce everybody first, and then we're going to jump in and have discussion. So I'm trying to find where all my stuff is. Here we go. So first and foremost, we have a couple of panelists today, and I'm going to introduce those guys. And then we're going to talk about the topic today, which is what will it take? And I feel like, tell me panelists, after yesterday, after yesterday's news lines, I feel like we're in for it. What will it take? And so today we have with us Sarah Woodward. Sarah is an AI expert, tech guru, and she's going to share from her perspective what is going on in the world from this, technology, advanced AI space. We have Paul Johnson, one of the one and only lurking males in this female group that we have going on here at the Executives Lounge. We are expanding this year, everybody, into recognizing that really to have true, honest conversations about how to create real systemic and meaningful change in our societies, we must do it together. Paul is an advocate, ally, DEI expert, and incredibly passionate about bringing uncomfortable conversations to the forefront for important change in society. And then we have Sherry. Sherry is a licensed hypnotherapist, tarot reader, spiritual, energetic extraordinaire, and Janae is adjacent with psychic abilities, tarot readings, and really understanding how to help people walk into their purpose in life. We also have a few people that may be joining us here in a little bit, but welcome panelists.
Hello.
So I also want to mention we have some questions that we're going to bring to the table. And so in order to kind of share and spend time, we're going to sorry, I have somebody trying to roll in. We are going to spend maybe 1.5, 2 minutes in our responses. So just trying to make sure that we give some space to everybody. And then I have Dr. Stone Brown visiting us as well. So I'm going to introduce Dr. Stone Brown too. She's just rolling in. She is has been instrumental to my PhD research and work. For those of you that may know my PhD work, it's focusing on the impacts of toxic leadership on women in leadership. And the theoretical foundational framework of that is looking at Maslow's hierarchy of needs and recognizing that it is incorrect, and that our motivational needs as human beings really stems in the space of love and belonging. And this was taught to Maslow by the Blackfoot tribe back in the 1940s. And so that's where Dr. Stone Brown's expertise comes into play. She is Indigenous, has done a ton of research in that space, and I'm excited to bring her into the mix as well. So that being said, let's talk about the topic, you guys. What will it take is the topic, right? And
1 second.
No problem. So what will it take? And the reason I came up with this topic is because, there we go, is because as we've been watching the politics of our society, but I think more importantly, the discussions around the micro community spaces, I have been noticing big, important changes in how we're talking about things and how we're approaching each other and building community. And that's when I started thinking, what will it take? Redefining leadership, redefining community base, redefining how we share resources and how we speak and care for each other. And so I want to hand it over and start with just the basic question of, what do you think it's going to take to really build community around love and belonging and what we really need as humans?
I could start if you like. Okay, great. So hi, I'm Sarah. And I definitely am really excited about this kind of conversation. Christine and I talked about a year ago around just like, we were discussing AI and whatnot. And so it might seem like I'm not like the right speaker on this panel because I'm not in policy or social justice or anything, but I do think that it's important that, we kind of look at like the challenges we see in business, which is scarcity, hoarding of resources, fear-driven decision making, and we're seeing the same things hold societies back. Businesses struggle when they don't equip their teams with the right tools and when they gatekeep information. And, when leadership decisions are driven by fear rather than vision, we see things fall apart, and societies struggle for the same reason. And so I think that, some of the things that we're going to look for is evolving leadership. And I'm sure I'll have an opportunity to get into this in a little while, but, really exploring how AI can democratize access to information, and how do we get a lot more people involved in the conversation in generally. And so, so really like, how do we create better leaders who really want to bring other people along in that society and business? And then it's, how do we make sure that the right people are paired with the right resources to be successful? And in business, that looks like, software and executive sponsorship and stuff like that. But in society, it's a lot bigger.
Yeah, if I could add to what you just said, Sarah, I was just like, yes, nodding the whole time. I'm in complete agreement. You touched on something really, really big, which is the scarcity mindset of our society. And it actually has led into imposter syndrome for those people that want to step up into true leadership. Having that ability to actually see themselves. Society is not supporting that. We're very much so eating our young, those really free-spirited people that want to think outside of the box. And things like a sense of justice, labeling, scarcity mindset, fear, playing one against the other, the I perspective, me, is really gobbling up that creative flow that we need in the leaders for tomorrow, those ones that can see the we of society, the collective needs of society. And so I think it almost comes down to what it's going to take is for all of us to say, enough is enough. Let's try something different. We collectively have to agree that we're ready to steer the ship in a different direction. And we still have some people kind of rooting into that old mindset of like, this is how it's been done. This is how we do it. Feet, keep your eyes down, keep looking straight ahead. Well, it'll all work itself out, when we just, we need to shift into that we collective mindset. So I do agree with you, Sarah. And it has a lot to do with the hoarding of resources, of gatekeeping, of, really thinking about just me and how this affects me, rather than, if I give you this information, now you can carry this torch and make it even bigger. And it has nothing to do with it being taken away from me. In fact, I'm contributing, I'm co-creating in this idea. But there's so much fear around not getting enough attention for it, or being recognized for it, or being a part of something. And so we kind of have to start with creating safer spaces for people to actually feel seen and recognized for who they are and why they are so instrumental to the whole project, to the whole world, to the whole collective. So yeah, that was such a great point to start off with, Sarah. I was like, yeah.
Thanks.
I think she's muted. Oh, there you go.
Okay. Yeah, I'm back now. Okay, so I really like what you were talking about, and building upon people coming into the we collective, and understanding like we all have to come together. One of the things that I have seen though, the younger generation, they are amazing. Like, I know I look really young, I am, but Gen Z, I have seen like they are really taking this to another space, to where I think the older generations are stuck on this the way that it's always been. But these young kids out here, they're not doing the like program anymore. They
They're
will
not
quit
playing.
a
They're
job
not
easy.
playing.
They're not. Yeah, if they're not getting treated right, if they don't like it, they will leave in the middle of a shift, and you're just like, you're just gonna leave. They're like, yeah. So I think it's like understanding too that they've reached the point where it's enough for them, So I think it's getting to these other people, kind of the older people who have been rooted in this for a long time of this is how it always is, because I'm seeing a lot of people that they're breaking it down. Like TikTok will even show you they're not on that path anymore. And I think you see some of the older people getting really upset about what's going on. Yeah, there's a huge change that's being sparked. And people are now going for the things that they want, doing their like actual passions. Like, and I'm not talking about everybody, obviously, but when more of the younger generations, they're going after what they want. They are willing to, be homeless, but be a like starving artist, and they're cool with it. A lot of the younger people too, they don't care about houses and
I think they're
about
also
diamonds.
saying though,
They're
like,
willing to
is
more.
this really how we want to value our system? I think that's they're starting to do that too. Like, I will be a starving artist to prove a point so we can make change. Paul, I want to shift to you.
Yeah, thanks. So I've been sort of an activist for, I would say, 17, 18 years now. So I've been a part of activist groups. I've just kind of watched and observed activist behaviors, and I'm pretty active on social media, especially LinkedIn. And one thing I've observed that I think gets to your question is, and I think one thing that oppressive systems thrives on is in the infighting that happens among the groups that are actually trying to dismantle the system, whatever phrase you want to use. And that's what I see a lot of. There's a lot of infighting among groups that are trying to make a change, and it leads to counterproductive behaviors. It's distracting. It doesn't actually get at the root cause. And I apologize. Is there background noise that you're hearing? Okay. I'm at a hotel and they just happen to choose this time to clean the floors, so it's unfortunate. But so one thing I've been thinking a lot about lately, and I'm speaking for myself as a privileged identities, is shame. And I see so much shame behaviors in cancel culture, in attacking people, calling people out. And what's interesting about this is and I took part in this too. So what is tempting about these things, this infighting, this trying to prove someone wrong or put them in their place or cancel other people, it feels like progress. It feels like we're fighting systems. It feels like we're ending racism. It feels like we're ending sexism. When in reality, we're just perpetuating systems of a punitive behavior. It's not liberation. I think one thing that I've been learning is what actually is collective liberation. Like, what are we actually striving towards? And some of these behaviors are very much counterproductive to liberation. And we're fooling ourselves into thinking that by calling these people out, tar and feathering them on social media, we're making progress. And I just don't believe that's making progress.
I think that's a great segue into kind of Dr. Stone Brown's work and kind of looking at what should we be focusing on? Like, and really what we should be focusing on is this sense of love and belonging and care and thoughtfulness around how to cultivate positivity and goodness, right? And I think, one of the pieces of research that I've been able to do in the process of kind of learning this space of what are human motivators and how do we build society in that space is looking at the infighting. I mean, Dr. Stone Brown's work, and I don't know if you want to jump in. I don't know if you can, Dr. Stone Brown, she's here, is, in her book, she talks about the indigenous infighting and debates around who is indigenous. I don't know if you can step in, Dr. Stone Brown. Hi. Oh, let's unmute. It's not letting me unmute. Well, we'll come back, but yeah, she's here. But that's kind of the work that that she's been doing for a majority of her career, is looking at this research around what is inclusion, what is love and care and actualization, right? Like we talk about self-actualization in this society a lot. Pull yourself up by the bootstraps, work really hard, become something big, and nobody can complain about it. And that's just not true, because self-actualization just can't happen in a silo. Actualization happens in relation to others. It happens in community. And I think that's a piece of our society that we really lost from colonization to pioneer days, right? I wanted to ask a question about kind of that capitalism, colonialism, pioneerism that we've kind of founded our society on. Why do you think that we still rely on outdated systems of capitalism and governance when they're repeatedly failing us?
I can start by saying I think that people got very comfortable with having labels, with having boundaries, with having rules, with having boxes that they can exist in. Being a hypnotherapist, I always look at the way in which we are perceiving information, and that really does shape our belief structures and the way in which we're viewing the world. And up until this point in time within humanity, we have actually experienced that linear movement of information. And so putting people into boxes really helps people to understand who they are, what their role is, so that they don't have to think too much about it. And it's a place of comfort. And we are actually being pushed out of those boxes, out of those labels, out of those structures. And it's really, really uncomfortable for people who have built an entire belief structure, an entire perception based on their surroundings. And that, I think, is what we're actually seeing reflected back, is people not understanding their belief systems based on how they're feeling, how to change that, and what they actually want to see in the world. So they kind of stay in those boxes out of fear. They're just not sure quite where to go. And I think that that's our next step, is recognizing that there is an option, and it is to feel better, and it is to feel lighter.
You call out fear a couple times, and I think that's so critical. I was able to unmute Dr. Stone Brown. Dr. Stone Brown, welcome. I'd love for you to jump in. Maybe not. Technology, it's great until it's not. Oh.
Right?
We'll see. All right, keep going. Sherry, I totally agree. I think the fear base of some of this is, you've just hit the nail on the head in terms of what I always fall back to, especially in decision making. That when we make decisions based out of fear, I always say nothing good can come of it. But if you make a decision out of love, or a place of love and care, it might not be the right decision, but it won't be a bad decision. Yeah, I'd love for someone else to jump in. Go for it.
Well, I also think the reason why people are staying in the same capitalist system is some people just don't know what else there is. I think we all have the same feeling, like this isn't working out. But there are just a lot of people that aren't willing to, okay, this isn't working out. What are we going to do instead? And some people, I mean, it's no shame. Some people just don't know what would we do outside of this? Who would we actually be? So it really just, it is a fear, and it's also this thing of well, I also kind of don't know. I don't want to use the wrong word and offend anybody. So I'm just going to say some people just don't know what their other options are and how they can get there.
I'll add that I think, Sherry, you were spot on about identity. Because I think as far as capitalism goes, historically, we've had these really valuable industries, right? Tech and finance and medicine and law. And those have all been kind of protected by specialized knowledge. And so I think that there's a lot of times, capitalism gatekeeps to certain kind of populations, right? Or certain, groups, whatever. And it continues to perpetuate those groups, whereas, it certainly increases divides for others. And I think about okay, to be a software engineer, for instance, you needed to learn how to code to be an engineer, right? or you needed a law degree to draft a contract or something like that. And and that assumes a couple of things. One, that you grew up in a household that actually talked about going to college, that you were encouraged to strive for those things. And and even more so then, okay, did you have the financial resources to go to school, or did you have parents who even knew how to apply for financial aid, right? And so like there has been a barrier for a very long time. And one thing I am really excited about AI is that the AI, the language of AI is no longer, machine learning and computer code languages and whatnot. It's conversational. And so if you can speak, you can train AI. If you can think critically, you can leverage AI. And so that gatekeeping of like expertise is fading. And so what I'm really hoping is that, over the next decade or so, we're seeing a lot of upward mobility as far as like what is possible for me career wise, because maybe I don't have the skills or expertise or experience to say, be an office manager, right? But I do have a chat GPT who can actually help me be really successful in that job if I happen to be able to communicate. So I think it's going to be really exciting. So, whether or not we can break down capitalism in this country, and I don't know with what's happening right now, if that's ever possible, we can make capitalism work for more people. And I'm not saying that that's like my POV, but what do we do in absence of an alternative?
Yeah, when I think about that question, like, why do we continue to perpetuate the system? It makes me think of the question, like, why do people stay in toxic jobs? Right? Like, because as an outsider, you might, why don't you just leave? It's toxic. Every day you talk about how toxic it is. It's terrible. Why do you stay? And usually people say, a lot of times people don't really know, because there's an emotional part of this tied to it, and sometimes with emotion it doesn't connect to language, and so people just say, I don't know. But what I really think is it serves us. Like at the end of the day, it serves us. It's paying the bills. And what capitalism does is create scarcity, whereas people need it to survive. And so we have families, we have bills, we have things going on. It is something that we reject, but it's also something that we benefit from, especially those with privileged identities, of course, right? So there's this dissonance around, I reject the system, but I also rely on it. And there's not a lot of choice. Like I think about, and choice is complicated too. Like recent example is, with Target coming out, I don't know if you saw that, and saying we're done with DEI. My initial thought was like, I'm done with Target. I'm never going to shop there again. But then I saw another viewpoint. It's like, well, but there are a lot of Black and brown business owners who have contracts with Target. If you don't shop there, they lose their contract. And I was like, well, okay, now what do I do? What's the right thing, right? It's really complicated. So
well, and to that point, like Tabitha Brown, she's she's one of the people that she has product there, and people on TikTok are blasting her for not pulling out immediately. But Paul, you're making a good point. It's like, that's my livelihood, that's my security, that's paying my bills, and I'm on contract. What do you expect me to do? I think there's this total dichotomy of trying to live your values and really being stuck in the capitalistic system that we're stuck in because of the security and the safety of what it's providing. We don't necessarily know alternatives right now.
Yeah, and that blasting is exactly what I was saying earlier. It's not productive. It's not conducive to actually collectively working together towards action. It results in the infighting, and those in power are sitting back, smoking their cigars, watching all of us fighting each other and saying, yeah, this is exactly what we want, right? So it's so complex. I think we want to make it simple. We want to make it this one right way of thinking about it. It just isn't. And I think these attempts are just to soothe their own anxiety and fear. Fear, I think, is kind of the word of the day.
Yeah. I do want to mention, I don't know how to get Dr. Stone Brown's video to work, but audio is working. Dr. Stone Brown, I'd love for you to jump in. I know we've kind of been popping all over the place on topics, but I'd love for you to come in and just share some thoughts.
Sure, I'd be glad to help. I appreciate your dialogue because you're asking important questions and you're contemplating the cause and effect of choices and decisions that we make. The first thing I want to say is we're all relatives. And that when we talk about what's going on in the world right now, you have to know history and understand that what happened in this country was manifested in Germany. And the prototype for what happened in this country was what Germany used during World War II to manifest the hurtfulness and the harm that was caused. And it's ironic that yesterday was the Holocaust Remembrance Day. It's really important that people start talking about history and that we understand that we're in a very dire time. The elders of tribes across the United States and Canada that I know and that are resources to me are deeply concerned. We are sovereign nations in the United States. We have sovereignty and we have the independence of a single nation within the United States. So the idea of citizenship was determined in 1924, and here we are, 2024, with people questioning our citizenship. I am a member of the Blackfeet tribe of Montana. We are a nation, and I'm a member of the Confederacy of the Blackfoot people in Canada, which is 3 reserves in mine make up that confederacy. We were torn apart by a border, and the border said we now were Americans that were enrolled in this part of the, and those in the Canada were enrolled, they were now Canadians. Well, we're First Nation. That needs to be acknowledged that my tribe has the oldest DNA in the United States. Did you know that? That we have been in the same place for 10,000 years. And our DNA is now showing up as 25,000 years. So I want to tell you that when Maslow encountered our tribe in 1938, he was very young, just out of his doctoral program. He was doing some study, and he encountered elders that told him about how people were secure and how to create a secure society. And if you've been trained in Maslow's hierarchy of need, that's not his, by the way. That came out of corporations. He wanted to display it in a circle. And when I showed the elders in Canada in 2006, when I was up there presenting, they said, we've been looking for you, because they understood that what I was displaying was what I dreamed. And they asked me to write a book. And my book is Transformation Beyond Greed, Native Self-Actualization. But I said self-actualization for those people who only know a model of actualization is self. And it's true, it must occur within the group. So first of all, I want to acknowledge that I'm not perpetuating pretend Indians. You don't need that. What you can be is yourself, honor your own cultural ways, your own background, your own genetics, find your original people. You were indigenous, and when you were indigenous, you knew the importance of working together and helping each other and living in a secure, stable way. So yes, we are going to change the world. And when we do, it will be one person at a time, but it will be the collective strength of the community and the collective strength of us saying what is going on and has been going on for hundreds of years for Native people and for people who flew away from anything that had to do with destruction. They were looking for peace. They were looking for security. They were looking for dignity. And when the elders talked to Maslow, they wanted him to understand that actualization is everyone. It's not a few. And that he encountered for the first time a secure society. And he had never seen one before. And he didn't know what to make of it or how it possibly could happen. But this is how we lived for thousands of years until the colonists arrived. My mother is a descendant of those colonists. My father is a descendant and a member of the Blackfeet tribe of Montana. So I can tell you that I've had a balanced perspective of honoring my mother. My dad said, we never refer to your mother as white. She was your mother. We never refer to people as only one or another. If someone tells you how much Indian are you, you ask them, do they want the dog version or do they want the horse version? Because we're the only people that are demanded to be enrolled and identified by degree. That's inhumanity.
And you know, and one of the things that Dr. Stone Brown and I talked about that was so compelling to me and so important is when we start categorizing people, we start losing humanity. We can categorize ourselves for identity and for sense of belonging in positive ways that give us this sense of self and sense of self in relation to others. But when we start categorizing and putting people in these boxes, I think that's where we dehumanize people.
The name of my book is Transformation Beyond Greed, Native Self-Actualization, because I wanted people to understand that this is not just for Native people. It's indigenous knowledge, and it's wisdom of the ages. We're called the ancient ones. So we're passing on, and I've been given permission by the tribes in Canada as well as my own to transfer this information to you. So it is transformational for our society and for the world. And I've been working with psychologists in Denmark, in England, in Ireland, and I'm also working with doctoral students in Australia and the United States. So I can tell you that people are starting to say, oh, yeah, I know Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but I want you to flip it. I want you to see it as transformational, that life is valued. So I think of life, and the Lakota people in Standing Rock coined the phrase that water is life, and it is. Water is life. We can't live without water. We can't live without air. So I see us all as that water. We're all interrelated.
So I want to bring this back to panel because I think this is important what Dr. Stone Brown is talking about and why it's so important that I've been able to connect and have her in my mentorship. It's been instrumental. You know, I think one of the things that non-Indigenous people struggle with is how do I become an ancient wisdom keeper? How do I become a wise, knowledgeable person about history, about ways of life without appropriation, right? Like Maslow appropriated teachings and shifted it into this American psychology, American society, and then it was kind of taken from there, right? But how do we learn from and become aware of and then practice teachings without appropriation? And so the question I want to ask the panel is, what can we learn from this ancient wisdom, these indigenous practices, and how do we reclaim these practices, being aware that appropriation is not our intent, but living a better life together is our intent?
If I could say, and just sort of build off of everything that's been communicated so beautifully, it seems like, you know, we're staying in these boxes, and because of fear, we've addressed that. But I think it's also this part of I'm powerless. I'm just me. I'm just living in this world with my perspective. And it's an I versus a they. They have the power. They have to choose for me. And we're so focused on the I, me, versus they, that we are actually keeping ourselves so small and so hidden in these little boxes because it's all that we know. And what's interesting is we're recognizing how tumultuous our climate is becoming within the collective. That is not an accident. And I think that is happening to force us out of our boxes. In order for us to fully step out, we have to recognize that we are that we hold the power, that we are the decision makers, that we are sovereign beings, that we have free will, that we have choice, that we can choose. Our souls can take whatever direction we want them to have. We can choose to see ourselves as a powerful being. And when we make that decision, we then get to recognize that we have an opportunity to change our perspective. Rather than me trying to get you to conform to my ideas and my belief structures, I am now open to changing my belief structures to include your perspective, because we're a we. Your experiences are now my experiences, and we get to join those perspectives and those experiences at a soul level so that we can grow and expand beyond the limitations of the I, of the me, of the they.
I think we also need to start figuring, like, so it's like, what is appropriation? And I'm not saying like I don't know. What I'm saying is, some people get really tied to, oh, this identity is a part of this group of people. One of the things like people always talk about is, if you're not Black, then you shouldn't be wearing braids. Well, that's not just tied to being Black. Like, there are so many other cultures that have had braids a part of them. So it's like, what makes that appropriation? And it's like, I guess if someone is doing it and they're making fun of you, or they're not really respecting the culture that it comes from, yeah, that's problematic. But it's really not like a problem for someone to, enjoy and respect someone else's culture, or even then we get into the bigger part, enjoy and respect someone else's identity. And it's one of those things where, yeah, we got to get out of these boxes, out of this is for them and this is for like they and this and this. And it's like, we are all one. We are all have this ancient wisdom, this ancient knowledge. And it's like, we all just need to come into a huge group and just understand, like, oh, we are all a part of this. It's not just you're this and I'm that. We can be both and exist as one.
I love that. I think one of the I don't know, things that we also need to do, and I love that Dr. Stone Brown was kind of inviting us all in to make these frameworks and things our own. But it's like ultimately it is that ancient wisdom, and we are not the authors of that, right? And so it's like making sure we acknowledge, hey, where does this learning come from? And we're not experts in it, and we've been able, like, just like none of us are, whether or not we're experts in what we do today, that knowledge was handed down either through education or bosses or whatever. And like throwing kind of accolades back, or just citing how we are evolving and what it is that is encouraging that evolution.
Paul, I want to start a question off with you from an activism perspective. Activism and hope can inspire change, but frustration and outrage are often the catalysts for movements. And so here we are talking about we shouldn't be fearful. We need to be loving. We need to be caring. But we know that these new systems and these movements tend to come from spaces of outrage, fear, anger, fed upness. I want to start with you. What are your thoughts on that, and where do you see us going?
Oh, you're just gonna throw an easy question at me, huh? Thanks. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is that rage and frustration are natural human emotions. It's frustration is, I remember hearing a definition of frustration is that comes from when something is in the way of your goal. You get frustrated. You're trying to get out of the grocery store quickly and someone cuts in line in front of you. You get frustrated, right? Someone's getting in the way physically, literally and figuratively. Rage comes from, from my understanding, a feeling of injustice, which is one of the most core human things is justice and fairness. So rage happens when we're experiencing injustice. Recently, I had that happened personally with, I won't get into the story, but with something going on with my home, and rage came out. Rage and frustration are tricky because, first of all, they're very, very valid. They do galvanize people. They do kick off action. However, speaking personally about my experience, I kind of regret some of the things I did out of rage. They were not actually conducive to getting the justice that I wanted, and may actually have, I actually tripped myself up. So there's things that I said and did that I now regret that was out of rage. So you really have to be discerning in what are you doing and saying out of that rage. Is it productive? Is it getting you to the outcome that you want? Is this just a, I think it's some of the rage for me and other people is, and very valid. It's an attempt to heal. It's an attempt to get it out. Right. Because it's, if it stays in there, it's unhealthy. It's toxic. We want to get it out of our system and our bodies. So, and this ties back to what I was saying earlier, the rage then can start to go to each other within our activist circles, right? Because the rage what we're doing, we're not seeing any results and we feel helpless with those results, that anything will change. And so we start to then fight amongst ourselves, which comes from a lack of hope, back to your point. So hope is more sustainable. We absolutely need that. Otherwise, it's like, what's the point? Why do we even try? So, I mean, it's a range of emotions. All emotions. I'm not saying one emotion's bad. That's just not true. All emotions are valid and true. It's more about discernment. That's what I'm learning, is discerning which emotions are needed right now, and even when I need to process my emotions, or by myself, with other people, does that actually lead to action? It's very complicated, but I'm also learning quite a bit about trauma and shame and how that is not conducive and actually can perpetuate harm in many different ways. I won't get into it. I'm actually starting to write a book on it. So, but yeah, that's what I'll say to that.
And I think the question then becomes, right, is like, do we have, like, activism comes from fill in the blank, and I think for some people it's rage, it's anger, it's I can't believe this is happening. For others it's hope and love and care. How do I cultivate that in my community? How can I be part of a new kind of ecosystem that has the systemic change happening? And so the question is, do we have to tear down the old to get to the new, or do we have to have the fire of anger? Like, that's a question for you guys. I don't know if who wants to jump in next here.
Well, if I can say, I don't know that if it's tearing down the old or allowing ourselves to alchemize it into something that is changed and something new that incorporates all aspects. We've already recognized how if you cancel out history, you're going to repeat it, or it's going to rhyme. So I think there has to be a level of awareness of where we are, where we've been, but where we want to go. And in terms of emotions, we all have different relationships to each emotion. And I think that is a big part of all of our stories and our perspectives and why we approach certain situations with certain emotions. It's because we have either been taught to use them in certain ways, or we have been manipulated with those emotions in certain ways. And so we need to actually declare a space right now. We all have to agree that our emotions are breadcrumbs to the soul's self-actualization. So allowing ourselves to have healthier relationships with these emotions, to determine what is truly important and what we are actually truly trying to convey. Because at the end of the day, we all want to be seen. We all just want to be seen. We all want to be heard, and be remembered for who we are. So allowing ourselves to have a safer relationship with these emotions to help guide us forward, and not being so hung up on what the name of the emotion is, but what we are feeling as a result of it, and allowing ourselves to use those emotions as a guide.
I don't think this is about like tearing anything down as much as, Dr. Stone Brown was talking about. Maslow saw that there was a society that was functioning, that was loving, that was able to have everything that they needed. So it would just be people understanding that, oh, we don't have to live like this. We have an alternative. There's been people who lived for thousands of years and didn't have half of the problems that we have going on. And the reason why we have a lot of the problems going on is because people want to stay in the same toxic relationship that they've been in, but they also kind of don't know. They're not educated enough to understand, like, oh, there were people who didn't live like this. Like, there are people in our world and in our society that doesn't understand that you don't have to live this everybody against everybody type of way. And in fact, it's been proven that that doesn't work. And it's interesting that we see it not working. And it's just, you kind of got to let people know, like, there's another way. We can all have everything that we need and still thrive. And no one's going to have to lose, as that's everyone wants to say that someone has to lose. Not if we're all on the same team, not if we all come to the same understanding. So I think it's also, too, people getting a little bit more educated about what what their other options are, and the like all alternatives, and them actually understanding too that it has worked.
I love what you're saying about just like the idea of we're all one team. I on the night of the election, I actually gathered with a lot of like-minded not election, inauguration, here in Atlanta, with a lot of like-minded, people to talk about, I mean, most importantly, how do we stay sane over the next 4 years? But also, just in general, like, how do we make a difference? How do we resist? How do we, like, be authentic in what we believe and stuff? And I know that there is a whole lot of people who are just like, I'm going to tune out and hide for the next 4 years. But the thing is that is privilege right there. I could tune out and hide. I could. But like, there isn't, I can't have babies anymore. So there is no legislation out there right now that impacts me. And that's why I can't be quiet.
I would say yet.
Yet, right. But we cannot just go, crawl under the covers. And while I think that things like marches on Washington and et cetera are important, they're important visual signals. Those aren't the things that actually made a difference. And it was like thousands of American communities at a community level getting involved and figuring out what we can do on the local level. Okay, people just lost Medicaid access. So how are we making sure that our kids' classmates have a backpack full of food to go home with? There are a lot of things we can do on the individual level to make sure that, that complacency doesn't win, right?
It doesn't. And I think, you were hitting on it, that we can all do something too. And I think, maybe we need to start with the like hope in ourselves and realizing, okay, I can do something. My twin told me this wonderful quote that Martin Luther King said. He said, if you can't run, walk. If you can't walk, crawl, but keep going. And it's like, yeah, I know it's going to seem like, well, what is this doing? But if you start, and if everyone just starts, okay, let's start putting in, let's start helping people out. I can help you. You can end up helping me. that's another way too that we can change the like system in itself, where when people aren't getting the access and the resources that they need, that's fine. We can find someone who can and who is willing.
I mean, and I think, you know, that's the work that I keep asking myself, how is my PhD work going to become active? How do I activate my PhD work? And the summit is a great example of that. I mean, for those of you that don't know, I'm putting together a gathering, a summit of community leaders across the country coming together to have these conversations and say, can we create new ecosystems of support, care, and resources? Can we look at supporting each other in different ways, where financials and finances might be a piece of that, but really recognizing that we collectively have a lot of wisdom, we have a lot of resources, we have a lot of knowledge, we have a huge network if we put it together, right? And I think that's the space where I've become an activist, where I've started positioning myself to say, how do we start having those conversations, Janae? Because those conversations are where people are going to feel like we're going to be okay. And we're not just going to be okay. We're going to find ways to thrive within our communities and then connect those communities together so that we feel the collective thrive, where, as Dr. Stone Brown mentioned, the actualization happens when we can actualize as a community. Majority are actualized. I mean, Maslow's works in with the Blackfoot tribe said 86% of all of the population of that Blackfoot tribe in the 1930s was actualized. In the American society, 2 to 4% are actualized at any given time.
Yeah, I think when we're keeping ourselves in these small channels, like we're all getting frustrated about the politics, about, I mean, we're sitting here talking about how we want to become these expanded versions of ourselves in the self-actualization, but we're actually allowing ourselves to have one person determine how we feel every single day. We're allowing one person to determine where our rules are, where our sovereignty is, or where it isn't. And so we as a collective, are we not turning to saying, okay, what do we choose for ourselves? It's actually written in our independence that if our government is not upholding our safety, our security, then we choose. Where is that? Instead, we're still trying to play the game that the government outlined that we're allowed to play. So I think it's time for a different type of conversation of not how do we navigate the next 4 years? How do we navigate how we're feeling? How do we come together, and how do we rather than playing a game that has been outlined for us to play, because we're not set up to win that way. We're set up to be controlled that way. So we need different
and
questions.
always needing, we're set up to not just be controlled or to be in this system where the rules are set for us, but we're also being told that, you know, we're always going to be needing.
One thing that I know personally will probably be an ongoing journey, but I feel like we need to let go of is what I think is the urgency or the desire to fix this in my lifetime. There's just so much.
Come on, Paul.
I need to fix this in my lifetime. Things need to be better when I leave this earth than when I found it. And we just have to let go of that, because it's not going to happen. It's just not. I remember one of the most influential books I've ever read was Resmaa Menakem's My Grandmother's Hands. And I remember him saying, I'm not going to get exactly right, I love how he says we have to heal our way through racism. We're not going to outthink it. We're not going to outsmart it. We're going to heal our way through that. And that comes through culture building and changing the way we do things, which is what we're talking about today. He said that if we do it right, which is a tall order, it'll take 7 to 8 generations for like white folks, speaking in this case, white folks, or just generally that like we heal our way out of racism. 7-8 generations. And I think that's probably being optimistic. But I think for me, though, it's such a relief to first of all know that it's not on me as an individual, that we've talked about that. It's up to us as a collective, and it's not on me to fix this in my lifetime. There's so much of the saviorism complex at play here that leads to so much anxiety, and that drives the fear response, which, as we've been talking about, does not drive good actions or decision making.
I'd like to share that you just affirmed what elders have been saying, is that we must plan for the 7 generations and think forward. I'm 78. I retired this year, and now I'm doing these kinds of things. But I want you to know that there are over 570 tribes in the United States. They're all different. They have their own culture, their own language. The important thing is that you see that we have collectively a commonality of understanding of humanity, that what this is really about is restoration of dignity for all. That's what we're working towards. And I think AI is going to be very interesting because it can identify the misinformation and it can help inform. And so I really see it as hope for the future. And my elders have told me, take the best that we have, take the best that they have and create something new. And I think that that's what we are at, a starting point of realization that we're all related, that we're all one, and that we can do much. And if you think you have no power, you're just a little drop in that water, think of the force of that water as it comes down the mountains. I'm from a reservation right next to Glacier Park, which is the source of water for Canada and for the United States on the east side of the mountains. So I know water as a little tiny stream up in the Rocky Mountains, and I have lived at the Columbia River and the force of that river. So please understand, collectively we can do much, and think of yourself as the beginning of that stream, that you are carrying a message of hope, and you're working on restoration of your own dignity as well as the dignity of others. And what the elders wanted people to know is that we welcome all. They didn't fight against the newcomers. They tried to help them, and they built a fort and sat inside and looked outside. And they said they were pitiful and they were starving, and all we wanted to do was help. But it's a different mindset that we're going to be changing. And if you're welcomed in, then you're protected from unwanted influences. And that's where AI is going to come in. You're going to protect against unwanted influences and misinformation. I think of us as water. I think of this chaos that we see in the world right now as oil. And I think of fascism as fire. We have to have a barricade to clean up that oil spill. And we do have the technology to be able to do that. And again, I think that's AI. It's going to change the world. And it's going to undermine the things that are creating the chaos. And we need to have a sense of belonging. And that's what you're working on, is a sense of belonging for yourself. First, you belong to yourself. Then you belong to your family and your community. And for some people, they have to create a new family. They have to create a new community in order to have dignity. And then out of that, we're taught as Blackfoot people altruism, that we have a responsibility to give back. And when we give back, it creates stability for all. And then we live a spirit-based life, and it gets actualized. So that's what Maslow didn't get. He didn't understand. And so I want you to flip the paradigm and see an inverted teepee, not a pyramid, and start thinking about a new way of describing actualization for all, because that's really what the Blackfoot elders were teaching. And in my book, you see unpublished papers of Maslow that he didn't know what to do with them. And so I actually have them from the Psychology Archives in Akron, Ohio, and they're in the appendix in the back of the book. So for people, I tell them, if you're academically inclined, read the preface, then read Maslow's papers, then go back and start reading the book. And you'll begin to understand that our task is to restore dignity and not be confused by the chaos or give greater power and control through those who are creating the chaos, but have your own self-determination.
I don't think we could have wrapped this up any better. And I think this live discussion panel is an expression of the work that Dr. Sydney Stone Brown is calling on us to really do, right? She's been such an inspiration to my own knowledge and my own ancient wisdom base. And, you know, bringing my PhD to an active status, these conversations are that. How do we do what she's talking about? How do we, and I think it's the root of everything, right? It's not just the Blackfoot elders teachings. It's these thousands of years of knowledge of how to live in peace and harmony with each other, with the world, etc. I couldn't have said it better. And it's a great description of why this panel discussion was so important to me today. And I thank all of you for coming here and having this robust conversation. And I hope to do it again soon.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Christine.
you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank